Welcome everybody to the 13th episode of Earthly's Planet Earthly webinar series. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive, a close look at the Voluntary Biodiversity Credits that Earthly have launched in partnership with the South Downs National Park, our first partner in these credits. My name's Jenny, I'm from Earthly. I'm going to kick off by introducing our speakers, a little bit about Earthly and how we select projects. Then we're going to hear from the IFID Biodiversity Project, watch a quick video from them. Then we'll go into a bit of a Q&A, and there's time at the end, of course, for audience questions. So I'm really pleased to introduce our panel. So our panel today includes Sharan from Earthly, who joined earlier this year. She's our research portfolio lead. She is at Earthly to kind of oversee our portfolio of high integrity nature projects. Her expertise is guiding the way Earthly assess, score and represent our nature projects around the world. She's currently refining the adapted version of our project assessment criteria for the biodiversity credit project specifically. Also from Earthly team is Lorenzo, who is co-founder and CCO, pardon me. He's been working on accelerating funding to nature-based solutions since 2018 and has spearheaded the development of Earthly's biodiversity credits, mainly kind of capitalizing on his experience in the built environment, so incorporating England's biodiversity net gain as the basis of our credits. And then finally, we've got Mark Alden, who is Nature-Based Solutions Manager for the South Downs National Park Authority. Mark's a qualified member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors and has been with South Downs since 2017. Mark leads the kind of operational side of nature-based solutions for the authority. So that includes establishing trustworthy nature markets, assisting landowners to generate new income from that kind of unproductive land. He's also played a prominent role in co-developing with his colleagues the voluntary biodiversity credits that we're going to talk about today, and improving the kind of formal market for corporate buyers to funnel that private finance into nature's recovery. So just a few quick words about Earthly to start us off. Earthly's mission is to protect and restore at least 1% of the planet by 2030, and kind of on our mission to do that is to accelerate the funding that we can achieve from the private sector to the kind of highest quality, highest impact nature-based projects around the world. We are a small company, but we have an amazing set of customers. So we're working with over 600 companies so far, and they're from a real cross-section of industry and scale, and they all kind of work with us in slightly different ways, but are all very motivated to include nature in their sustainability strategy. We also have backing from some amazing partners in kind of the nature organisation space, and also nature tech space, and kind of organisations like the World Economic Forum's Uplink have been really generous to promote our work. So what we do is act as kind of a middleman between projects and the businesses that want to support the projects. But the way that we kind of set ourselves apart is by focusing on three key pillars. So nature, carbon and people are our kind of non-negotiable pillars when it comes to selecting and representing projects. This is because historically carbon removal projects, or maybe even biodiversity projects, have kind of prioritized that one element at the cost of other elements. So it could be a biodiversity project that compromises local communities or cultures, or it could be a carbon project that compromises ecosystems and native biodiversity. So our priority is finding those projects that support all three of those pillars. To do this, we've created an independent assessment that looks at over 100 data points kind of across all these three pillars, and we use that assessment to generate a score for each project that we assess. Within those data points, we have lots and lots of data sources. So I won't go into each section in depth, but we're looking at things like geospatial analysis, mapping. We have lots of kind of third-party bodies that we draw data from, including carbon from B0. And then we're looking at other biodiversity MRV. We're looking at kind of legals and risk to pull that kind of social element into it. And then AI and sentiment search is something that we're using more and more to just build up a really, really complex and quality data set so that we can give each project a score and decide if we want to work with them, represent them. So most specifically, which is what the webinar today is about, is our biodiversity credits. So in this way, we're working with biodiversity projects in England who have already been able to be part of the DEFRA biodiversity net gain framework. So working with these projects has helped us identify projects that are already sort of supported by DEFRA and have that kind of baseline trust and verification. I think we'll talk about it a lot later in the webinar, but what I just want to demonstrate from this side is that we're taking the biodiversity net gain unit, which is a quite significantly sized area of land at quite high cost, and breaking them down into smaller areas which are available for businesses of all scales really to purchase as a biodiversity credit. And then each one of those credits, those 3 by 3 meter squares, is transparent. It's trackable on a what 3 words mapping system. So they're kind of really identifiable, easy to allocate and avoid kind of double counting. So obviously we'll go into a bit more detail of the credits in the rest of the conversation. But next up, I just want to play a quick video from by the IFOD Biodiversity Project, which will introduce the project as well. And I'm just hoping that the sound.
I really love looking after this really special little corner of the southeast. It's a beautiful place to be and to work. And if we can make it better through everything that we're trying to do, then that's a really fantastic thing. I'm Ben Taylor, and I'm the Managing Director of the IFOD estate. 10 years ago, I had a bit of an epiphany. I began to notice what was around us. And at that point, I realised that actually we had something really special, something that needed preserving, enhancing, and making better. The Robinson family came here in 1895. They were dairy farmers, but they were also very keen conservationists, and they deliberately kept areas out of intensive arable production after the war. And we've gradually devoted more and more of the farm to the environment. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we've begun to really focus on the environment as actually a means of sustaining the business for the next generation. Anthony Weston is our consultant. He's been working really closely with me over the last 3 years to design the nuts and bolts of it, and his expertise in biodiversity is immense.
IFOD Biodiversity Project is the landmark project for biodiversity gain. So it's got great presence in the landscape in the national park, and it's diverse across various different habitats. I've been working in land management, getting on for 25 years. So it's been great to be able to apply that experience and knowledge to a whole landscape scale project like IFOD.
We've done a huge amount of work over the last 3 years, and it started off with assessing the habitats we've already got on the estate, what condition they're in, and then thinking a lot about what we can turn them into. The South Downs National Park is a really important stakeholder as well.
My name's Nick Keesman. I work for the South Downs National Park Authority, and I'm a countryside and policy manager. The vision of IFOD Estate is very in tune with the priorities for the South Downs National Park. So there's a real synergy there and a proper partnership. One of the benefits of buying into the vision and the plan at IFOD Estate is you're going to have real integrity to what's being offered. It's going to be delivered, it's going to be well monitored, you're actually going to be proud of what you're buying into. It's not just a token approach.
The beauty of the agreements that we've got with the South Downs National Park, who monitor it, is that actually it's really easy to roll out for the next phase and the phase after that.
So in the last 3 years, we've developed a really exciting vision for IFOD.
Our plans are to take the vast majority of the farm, about 2/3, and return it to nature. We've thought really carefully about how we do that. So it'll be a mix of grassland and scrubland and woodland. And straight away we're seeing species come back.
We've got a triple SI, that's a site of special scientific interest on the Brooks, and another site of special scientific interest on the Kingston Escarpment. One of the key themes is to try and create the linkages between those habitats.
IFOD sits in this interesting interface between the Ouse Valley, the wetland, right up to the chalk grassland, where you have up to 40 species per square metre, lots of orchids, amazing array of butterflies, and then going back down to that valley again, where you're going to find very interesting wetland bird species, such as lapwing.
Last year, the wetland was flooded for a long time, but as the water receded, the lapwings that have been there all winter stayed and they bred. And I've never seen a breeding lapwing on those fields before, and all of a sudden we've got them, and it's fantastic.
IFOD has a plethora of species. Looking at that flora, there's some really iconic species there. So the round-headed rampion, right down to bird's foot trefoil and kidney vetch, an amazing sort of variety of flora which give real colour. But off the back of that, it's the invertebrates that then feed on those. So you might be lucky enough to see species such as the common blue or the Adonis blue butterfly. Beautiful sort of striking colour, and then you have fritillary species as well, and then a lot of skipper butterflies, meadow browns and more common species. What nature needs is space, and places like IFOD offer that large-scale opportunity.
It's landscape scale. It's much better to have one big landscape recovery project than 1,000 small ones, and makes what we're doing much more relevant.
Development used to be the problem. Development now can be the solution for biodiversity net gain.
If you purchase biodiversity units from IFOD, you're investing in the future of this landscape.
This is a massive project, and it's going to create really big gains for nature.
Brilliant. So, Mark, is there anything that you kind of want to add off the back of the video just before we get going with the questions?
Sure. Thanks, Denny. Well, really, I guess by way of a bit of background, we held a really strong relationship with the IFOD estate and Ben Taylor, predating the environment plan, predating B&G. IFOD estate sit in the South Downs National Park. They're on the eastern end, and they are one of the first estates to have an endorsed whole estate plan, which meant that we were already aligned in terms of our organisation's objectives. We already knew each other well. We knew what success looked like for them, and actually they were clearly an agent to our national park purposes. So I guess, as perfect coincidence would have it, they were also the beneficiaries of NERF Round 1 funding, which was to work with DEFRA and Natural England to try and get a head start, I suppose, on what B&G providers, now we know them as off-site B&G providers, might look like for when the Environment Act came forward. And it's interesting that around that time, we were doing a Call for Nature sites campaign as part of our 33 by 30 Renature targets. And IFOD were on one of those lists. We had 74 applicants come forward on that Call for Nature sites. They were sitting there and they said, look, we are keen to be devoting our entire estate to nature, for which we all sort of fell off our chairs and got all very excited. And fast forward sort of 2 years, IFOD estate were the first landowner to register on the Natural England Register, secure a 31 hectare parcel of their land for nature recovery for B&G. And yeah, the relationship has really blossomed since then. So of course, when the conversations around expanding their nature recovery aspirations were had, and Lorenzo and I and others started to talk about voluntary biodiversity credits, they were a really obvious candidate to work with on this project. So.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like perfect alignment. So to kind of kick us off, I think we should take a step back and look at what is the nationwide or even global, I suppose, need for biodiversity credits as a solution. Sharan, do you want to kick us off with your thoughts on that?
Yes, happy to, Danny. Thank you. So like you said, let me perhaps start with the big picture. So today we're, of course, facing this unprecedented loss of biodiversity worldwide. Species are going extinct today at rates that we haven't seen since the age of dinosaurs, and the impacts are everywhere. This decline affects our food systems, it affects water quality, air, even our overall resilience to climate change. We rely on biodiversity for so many ecosystem services that essentially sustain life and maintain environmental balance. So I think you can see why this is something that we do need to address, and urgently. Biodiversity credits essentially are one promising solution that are gaining a lot of attention right now. At their core, biodiversity credits represent measurable actions that can help protect or restore natural habitats, plant and animal species, and essentially entire ecosystems. These credits can be bought and sold on marketplaces similar to carbon credits, but they're focused more on the biodiversity side of things. And it's essentially a way of financially supporting conservation efforts while holding companies accountable for their environmental impact. Now, talking a little bit more about the growing need for biodiversity credits, first and foremost, like I said, we have what we can only call a global biodiversity crisis. International organizations like the UN, WWF, the IUCN, the Convention on Biological Diversity, they're setting ambitious goals for the next decade. Like you just mentioned, the 30 by 30 target aims to protect 30% of the world's land and oceans by 2030. But to reach these goals, we need a massive amount of funding, much more than we currently have available. Biodiversity credits can help fill that funding gap, and by attracting private investments to support crucial conservation work. Then there's the corporate side of things. A unique aspect is of these biodiversity credits are that they're pursued by both compliance and voluntary sectors. More and more today, companies are facing pressure to measure and reduce their environmental footprint, and not just in terms of carbon, but we're seeing an increase in terms of biodiversity impact as well. Some industries like agriculture, construction, mining, they have impacts on diversity that can be very hard to mitigate or eliminate. But biodiversity credits, they provide a solution by allowing such companies or such industries to offset their impact by supporting these conservation projects elsewhere. Of course, it's not a substitute for sustainable practices, but it is a very valuable tool to make up for the impacts that cannot then be avoided. We're also seeing new regulations that require companies to assess, report, and mitigate their biodiversity impacts. There's the EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. It's a framework that we are seeing that's making it mandatory for corporations to be transparent about their biodiversity footprint. And these biodiversity credits essentially provide a way for companies to show that they're making or they're taking measurable and in fact impactful action to mitigate their impact. And I think one last thing that I'd like to add, another big reason behind the demand for biodiversity credits is the need to scale up conservation funding. I think I was reading a couple of days ago that right now the funding that we need to effectively protect biodiversity is estimated to be around $700 billion annually. And we're only covering a fraction of that with traditional government or nonprofit funding. These biodiversity credits, or by creating this market for biodiversity credits, we can open up new streams of financing to support conservation on a much larger scale than has ever been possible before. So I think before I go on, I'll also let Lorenzo or Lorenzo add to that if there's.
No, I think from the perspective of the why, I think it's incredible to see, especially in the UK, how much nature loss there has been, and I'm sure that a lot of people on the call might be aware, but I think it's a 19% decline since 1970s, and I think we all remember days when we were kids when we would get out of the car and there'd be bugs all over the windscreen, and today they're just not there. So I think it's really important to take action now, and I think this is a mechanism that hopefully will allow that nature to take time, but also to regenerate. And I think around the world there's different mechanisms, and this is I think one of the strongest we've seen in the UK.
And Mark, from maybe a more of a UK-centric viewpoint, what is the need for credits as a solution?
Well, I guess I would look at this through the lens of a landowner, potentially, because, our kind of local perspective here, we're not a landowner ourselves, a tiny little bit of the national park at Seven Sisters Country Park in the Far East, but fundamentally we are here to add value, enable and facilitate others to deliver on their objectives, which in turn deliver on ours. And I think if you take our local targets, we need to deliver 13,000 hectares of new space for nature by 2030. And that's on other people's land where that land is already committed in an economic system. And for that landowner, regardless, I guess, of how precarious that economic system might be through the UK's decision to leave the EU and the drop off to the tune of occasionally 40% of their original farming income, if they're going to be moving to a new income stream, it must equal or better what that income foregone would be. So a lot of our work is working with landowners to, yes, shape nature recovery to ensure it's aligned to Lawton principles, but also to provide confidence that they're making the right decision, but also aligned or be cognizant of some of the risks. And I guess supply and demand is a great risk for landowners who are looking to put their traditional current incomes to one side and embark on the pursuit of a new income stream without really knowing what those markets are like in front of them. And I think with compliance B&G through the Environment Act, we are seeing a lot of great excitement, and it is creating a culture and a behaviour. And we're also seeing ways to quantify biodiversity impact and gains, and that's incredible. What we need to do is probably pour a little bit of cool water on what compliance B&G is going to do in the marketplace. And I think the Oxfordshire, a local nature partnership, a recent report does this really well and articulates that actually we're probably going to only see 10% in the UK of finance needed for nature's recovery by 2030 coming from compliance B&G, and therefore we probably need to see other nature markets not replacing it but working in parallel to it, so that we can see our landowners have, I guess, wider nets to catch the private finance and funnel it into their nature schemes. So for me, voluntary biodiversity credits expands the opportunities for landowners to draw finance into their schemes, and that's really important because without landowners we've got nothing in the UK.
Yeah, agreed. 10% doesn't seem like much. So maybe using the BNG units as a jumping off point, let's talk about how these biodiversity credits, or maybe the Earthly Voluntary Biodiversity Credits in particular, were established. So Lorenzo, do you want to maybe just give us a run through?
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Jenny, for this. It's a 13th webinar, but it's great to be on these. And thank you, Mark, for joining us. So, yeah, I mean, I guess taking a step back, like Jenny said, Earthly's real purpose was to try to support leading nature-based solutions that could deliver on the outcomes that we require, and sometimes moving away from just the outcomes that the market, the tunnel vision, carbon or biodiversity. We wanted to sort of set, the bar for quality. And And when we analyzed the market for biodiversity, having had quite a lot of an understanding around that space, given our assessment, we felt that there was some flaws in the other opportunities, and to really scale the market, we really need trust, and we felt that having a government-backed scheme at the really early stages of this market was going to be an essential part, and that we could continue to build on that to ensure maximize quality. And so for us, looking at the government approved system was really fundamentally the beginning. And then trying to work, with a landowner and with a partner such as the South Downs National Park Authority, and luckily someone as nice as Mark, has been critical, because through the relationship we have the huge advantage that the South Downs National Park Authority is the local planning authority, and so enabled us to streamline and go through so many of the hurdles that other landowners have had in getting what was really crucially important for us, which was a 30-year commitment that this land would be in a state of recovery and biodiversity uplift over those 30 years. And we needed that, that element really to secure that the outcomes would be delivered for our clients. So again, really leaning on that important pillar of trust. And I think, if we can build that trusted market, if we can show buyers that there is, real tracking, metrics, transparency, checks on additionality, permanence, the things that we find so crucial, but even build beyond that. And so, what are these projects actually measuring on a social side? What can we look at, outside of the DEFRA metric? That's what starts to excite me. And so, it was really, through, the relationship that we had in working with Mark, who was really looking to expand this, and it sort of two worlds collided. And I think, luckily it's been very easy to work with the South Downs. And I don't know, Mark, if you wanted to add to that. I think, obviously, as an LPA, things haven't been easy on your side because it's quite new, right?
Yeah, I guess we have a unique perspective on this because we are a protected landscape. We're a national park authority, but we're also a local planning authority. So I often think that districts and councils and county councils get a bit of a hard time when it comes to biodiversity. They are burdened and shackled by waste management, education, schools, all those distractions which are so important to make society function. We are unburdened by all that, actually, as a national park authority, so we can focus on mission really clearly. And that really helps, because not only can we focus on a clear mission around environmental gains, we also have statutory powers as a local planning authority to actually, if we pull on those powers in the right way, they can be positive levers for change. And I guess we, as Lorenzo says, had these conversations probably 8-9 months ago, and it seems like a lifetime ago now, but they were kind of just conversations, weren't they, Lorenzo, until we were able to get NERF 3 funding. And we're really blessed to have that. That money comes in from the government, it pump primes and turns our kind of concept into a reality, or at least gives us 12 months to see what this establishment journey looks like. So I think we've been really beneficial to have that funding in place. And then I would say, just in terms of the separation of the roles, Lorenzo and Earthly do this incredible role around the avoidance of greenwashing, the trustworthiness and the authorizing roles. And I guess, our role isn't quite so cool, but it's really important. As an LPA, we need to have Section 106 legal agreements to secure this land use change. And with the NERF funding and working with Lorenzo, we've actually been able to build pretty groundbreaking legal agreements that not only secure compliance B&G as per the Environment Act, but also voluntary biodiversity credits on the same parcels of land through the same legal agreements to the corporate marketplace. So I think that's been really interesting. And in addition to that kind of LPA role, we're also a conservation body at heart. So therefore shaping what nature restoration looks like through the HMMP on these schemes is kind of our raison d'etre, and that's our happy place. And we do that in a landscape-led way, right tree in the right place, pushing ambition levels of the providers. And I think we've found a really a really fantastic place when it comes to voluntary biodiversity credits, working to our strengths, working with a partner like Earthly, a co-developer that can bring in their unique strengths to the marketplace. So yes, it's been great so far, and I'm really looking forward to the next sort of 9 months to see how we can develop this at pace and then roll it out across the country.
Yes, agreed. Hopefully a rapid scaling initiative. So that's, I guess, the Earthly side of things, and then the South Downs Authority side of things. But Lorenzo, what do you see being the benefits to a business to investing in biodiversity credits like these?
Yeah, I mean, I think, taking a step back, I think what I've seen fundamentally in the market is, when we started, it was very carbon orientated, and the market, for nature-based solutions was building. And I think even just in the last 3 years, we've really seen more businesses understand biodiversity. It's finally being spoken about. It's firmly on the agenda. And I think in recent years, as climate change has showed us through weather changing temperatures, disease through whether it's bird flu and things like that, droughts, we're really starting to see the impact of this changing environment and climate. And so, I think recent studies from the World Economic and PwC stated that, I think almost half of the world's GDP is connected to ecosystems. So for a really long time, we've been producing our widgets and doing all the things we have to do to make money and feed our families, but never really fundamentally calculated the next negative externalities that we were having on nature. It was a free ride. It doesn't matter. And now we're starting to see what happens when we don't pay attention. And that half of GDP is $44 trillion. And the more we go down this route of damaging the environment and not calculating the externalities, the more we damage, not only our chances of life on Earth, but the fundamental economic metrics that drives our businesses. And so what I would say is that business has finally come to the realization that if they don't take action, if they don't start to respect nature, they will have a problem economically in delivering the business models that they have today. And so I think this has been building. It starts through carbon and greenhouse gas protocol kind of calculations, and it will slowly build as we start to understand the impacts to nature. I think we are right at the beginning of this market. So, people that are supporting the market now are, the first movers, the challengers, the people that get it, that sort of understand that there is an impact to nature. They want to probably be initially socially responsible. So they see the loss and they say, I want to stop that. I want to be a part of the change makers that starts to change this market, starts to drive that market. And I think all new markets need those innovators, those champions. But I think the future of this market is much bigger. I think, as we start to look at people understanding where their supply chain risks are, understanding, where the change in temperatures and ecosystems that will impact their supply chains, we'll really start to see this market grow. And I think there's really core drivers here. The Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures has more and more businesses signing up. And these businesses have to go through a process called LEAP to calculate their impacts to nature. The SBT, the Science Based Targets Initiative, has also got a nature initiative. And so businesses, I think, in the future will start to calculate their impacts to nature. And sometimes reducing within the supply chain isn't always easy. So what can they do to improve ecosystems, elsewhere? What can they do to have a part to play, in a bigger recovery? And I think that's the future that we need and we're looking to. But at this early stage, we're really, I think, at the point where we're looking at champions. We're looking at people who want to get ahead of compliance, who want to lead the way and really demonstrate the art of the possible. And I think, if you look at the regulatory standpoint, the UK has, biodiversity net gain for the built environment. That obviously piggybacks a need under the Montreal Agreement to protect and restore 30% of UK land and sea by 2030. And governments around the world have these ambitions. They're huge, right? And we don't have very long. And so a business that's looking at these requirements, whether that's the Paris Agreement and the UK's legally bound in 2050 net zero commitments, we'll see that governments will have to do more to achieve these goals. And so a business today should be looking at that and saying, well, I want to get ahead of this, because being compliant is just ticking a box and just feeling like you're always behind and never being in front. What I think customers want and shareholders want is to get you ahead of it, right? To feel like you are leading. And I think that's where we want to take people on this journey, is take them on a journey that's trustworthy, shows, all the metrics and the things that we fundamentally know from the carbon world, to get them to build an ESG strategy that respects nature and brings them ahead of compliance. Because in my mind, the way the statistics are going, we're going to need regulation at some stage if this continues, right? So I think that's really important to look at from a business point of view. And I think business leaders are looking at that.
Yeah, so future-proofing as well as doing something kind of for the here and now.
Yeah.
Looking forwards, actually, Mark, the biodiversity credits are secure on the land for 30 years, but could you maybe tell us a bit more about how the South Downs approach to nature restoration, how that kind of sits with improving the context of your whole region?
Sure, no problem, Jenny. So yeah, I mean, in 30 years, I guess from a kind of project perspective, that's quite an easy answer, because through compliance B&G, the process is laid out, and the HMMP, the Habitat Management Monitoring Plan, will write the script of what we hope 30 years of nature recovery on that parcel looks like. I guess what we want to see in 30 years is super ambitious. It's, at least 13,000 hectares of new space for nature in our national park. It's at least net zero by 2040, hopefully before. But to achieve those targets, I mean, they are scary targets, if I'm honest, from an officer level sitting in this authority, not owning any land, which is a real bummer when it comes to actually having to make land use change to deliver these, and not having the land. Well, that's where the complexities lie. And I think I've touched on this before, but I'll give you a few stats. To meet our net zero target by 2040, we need to be delivering around 1,600 or 1,700 hectares of nature-friendly farming a year that was previously in intensive agriculture. We need 500 hectares of woodland a year, new woodland planted. Bearing in mind, in the last 10 years, we've had about 40 in the South Downs. It's mind-blowing. So we need to roll up our sleeves, and we need to be working with the landowners, the land managers, and the farmers that hold the key to the kingdom. Now, I guess there are some strange benefits in the South Downs of us being not necessarily the most perfectly located place in the country for farming. A lot of our farmland is grade 3B, grade 4 land. So farming up to now has been really tough generationally, really marginal, I would say. And actually, with common agricultural policy, with those European payments, with a pretty low cost of inputs, it kind of worked. And especially the sort of, the Dig for Britain war effort kind of made a lot of our chalk grassland farmland. And it kind of made economic sense. Well, those days are long gone. And I guess we need to turn those really difficult generational national policy changes into a kind of positive for our land-based sector. And we need to work out ways to do that really quickly. The advent of these nature markets, initially in this South Downs protected landscape, it was nutrient neutrality, then B&G. We've got woodland carbon schemes coming forward, voluntary biodiversity credits. We're starting to see a suite of nature markets. When you add the agri-environment schemes, which are really, really good at the moment, we start to see a kind of portfolio, a kind of blended finance opportunity for landowners to capitalise. But they need support. They need reassurance that they're not committing too much too early for not the right amount, because fundamentally it comes down to economic systems. How much do I get per hectare per year, for how long, and how much do I have to pay to be in this scheme? And I think we've got a really important role to facilitate and add value and enable that to happen if we're going to hit those frightening figures that I was quoting before. But we're really positive, and I guess one of our responses to these big targets has been to embed nature-based solutions in the South Downs National Park Authority early last year as one of the key mechanisms to deliver on these targets. And actually to date, we've delivered squarely on them. We're on target. We've committed, we haven't committed, we've secured 500 hectares of new space for nature. We've got over 4,000 hectares in a pipeline. We've got 500 hectares of woodland schemes in a pipeline. So change is happening, and I think with us investing in nature-based solutions as an authority, we're able to then support landowners who can then make those committed changes for us. Our aspiration, our strategy, if you like, in the South Downs is to work with landowners on privately owned land, empowering them to deliver land use change, to create a habitat banking approach so that we can guarantee that we're delivering on Lawton principles of nature recovery. We move away and dismiss sort of piecemeal, isolated efforts. It doesn't actually deliver the strategic nature recovery we need and want. And also, no one benefits, and we've sort of seen those in the past. So we're really committed to a habitat banking approach. We need, at any one time, 6 to 9 habitat banks operating in the South Downs to be delivering our targets. And to date, we're in the right direction, amazingly, when you see how big they are. IFOD is one of those pioneering landowners, 31 hectares committed for B&G last summer, another 18.75 hectares committed early October. We've got other habitat banks committed in the South Downs at 35 hectares. We've got another one, Hunniker Hill Farm, that's going to be committing 121 hectares of new space for nature by Christmas. So things are happening, things are changing, and I'm really lucky to be a part of it. And yeah, we'll keep watching with interest, because it's a very moving feast. But we're very lucky to have really innovative, ambitious, and committed landowners, and they're the ones who are going to be delivering on our national targets. So yeah,
amazing stuff. It's some impressive numbers there. I'm conscious of the time, and we've already got some questions through, so if anyone else has questions, please add them to the Q&A. So I think we should start looking closely at the credits. We've got a question about double counting, seeing as the land is being used for BNG units and voluntary biodiversity credits. So Lorenzo, I think if you could just talk a bit about the ledger maybe that Earthly have created, and how that's kind of helping with transparency and avoiding double counting.
Yeah. So I think, the trust, as I said right from the beginning, trust is a key pillar for us. And, as this is a new market and we've seen some of the issues that the carbon world has had, it was paramount for us that we really ensure that from end to end, the clients could trust the system. And so, ensuring that the 106 is available before any sales and signed is critical. That means that the land is going to be restored over that 30-year period, has going to have, intermittent reviews of the uplift to verify its outcomes, further analyzed by Earthly through our geospatial and other assessments that we run on ground. And so, that is an essential part. So what we've done with the landowners is that we have an agreement, or, in the case of South Downs, an agreement to hold BNG to the side for the voluntary market, so that it cannot be double sold, and there's specific allocation agreements set for BNG and for voluntary, to ensure that we also knew exactly what was being sold on the voluntary system. We emulated the best practice from the carbon world, so having an open and public ledger that enabled anybody and everybody to clearly and transparently see what's been purchased, where it's been purchased, when it was purchased, and exactly how much has been purchased. And that ledger should go live in the next week or so on our website. And so that for us was a critical part to ensure that there was, transparency. I think, we would love to have more automation when it comes to these types of systems to ensure that there was, better stamping and connections between sort of registries. But I think we're at the beginning of this, and I think the system that we've built is very transparent and very clear. There can be no sales on the voluntary and compliance market contemporaneously. And I think that's the critical thing. And I think that also goes to sort of enabling people to be proud of the work that they've done. Be very transparent on the buyer side, exactly what it is that they bought, why they bought it. I think we have to maximize that transparency, and I think that's going to be really critical. So I'm really excited to launch the ledger. We'll make sure that we share that with everybody on this call list. And also I saw another question in terms of the biodiversity. I think there was on the buyer side. So we launched, I think, Mark, we launched probably about 2 months ago. And we were really excited to have had our first sale not long after launch. So it was King, the makers of Candy Crush, as their core pillars have innovation and care at the heart of what they do. And so they wanted to really support this innovative solution and build this market. And so we made our first sale with Candy Crush and King. And actually just the other day, we had another large sale with another client. So I think we're seeing the appetite. I think from a point of view of Earthly, we have the advantage of being able to help our clients to create bundles. So where they want some high integrity carbon, but they want to have an impact in the UK, they can bolt those on. And I think that bundled approach is, I think, the way that businesses in the future can really maximize their impact. Looking at carbon in different locations where maybe the social impact will be best, or looking at things closer to home where they can support a leading a really needed solution such as biodiversity. So I think that's what we're seeing, and I think the market will continue to develop as we see more and more businesses undertaking that the TNFD review and the science-based targets, SBTN reviews. I think that will be critical to continue the growth of the market. So I hope that's answered the question, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's covered a couple of the questions coming through about the double counting, the additionality, and the other things that you covered there. So one question which I think would be really useful to help businesses especially understand is, once they have supported biodiversity projects and purchased biodiversity credits, how is best to talk about that climate action, avoiding greenwashing, not overstating? What kind of language are businesses supposed to use in relation to these credits?
Yeah, so I think happy to take that to begin with, but I think fundamentally these aren't offsets. These aren't created for people to say, I've done this damage, I'm going to buy this. These are contributions. These are ways that responsible brands can have be responsible for the goals that this country has to achieve 30% of the country protected and restored by 2030. That's a huge ask, right? And so if we take those kind of objectives seriously, if we look at the damage that we've imposed on nature and can see the detrimental impact that it can have on our businesses and supply chains, then we want to take responsibility. And so businesses who we work with are making these investments as contributions to demonstrate that they want to make a change and want to support that change. I would say that it's fundamentally important, and it goes back to why the ledger was built, is that what we've also heard from our clients is that people shouldn't hide behind badges and things like that. They should be as transparent as possible as to what they're doing. And that's also on us in terms of what the project is doing. And so for us, what we advise clients is to really share with them your journey. That from a carbon side, it will be the reduction side of the journey, what you're doing and where you are with the impact of nature. but waiting for all of those things, we can take action now, right? And so, we're contributing to nature restoration through these credits, and then be able to really demonstrate what's been purchased, because people want to interrogate. And I think the Green Claims Code and other regulations around Europe are just asking to maximize that transparency. And so with Earthly, we put the projects up not only on client dashboards, we will have a public ledger on these credits so everybody can see what's been purchased. And then we'll have the updated reviews of the assessments from the ecologist, which are again assessed by us again to ensure that everything's going on the ground. So I think maximizing that transparency is critical, because I think that's what clients are demanding now. And I think finally, I think there's an element of also there's the responsible element, and there's also sort of that social element, which I think often isn't spoken about when it comes to biodiversity. We just think it's the nature-based solutions, but there is a lot of social benefits that some of these solutions can derive. And I think some of our best projects that we're speaking to are also doing a huge amount of work with local schools, helping them to train classrooms of children on the importance of nature. There's people that are running business workshops and retreats to further understand nature and their impacts. So I think there's a lot that can be done, and I think we're looking at businesses that want to contribute and want to maximize that transparency, but want to start now to have that impact. I don't know if anybody would add anything else on that.
I think it's also probably worth adding from Earthly's perspective that all Earthly customers receive a personalized impact dashboard. So a dashboard that's you can share publicly, and it demonstrates your carbon, social, and biodiversity impact, but also the kind of total area that you've contributed to protecting. So it's a really nice way to drive engagement and also adds that transparency. We also provide our customers with a customer hub where we store media, resources, templates, that kind of stuff to help with sharing the sustainability journey. And then finally, we have another step, which is a subscription option, and you can gain a bit more bespoke support that way to kind of accelerate your engagement with your audience, with your climate and nature action. So as mentioned, we're running tight on time, but I'll try and get a few more of these questions out. Interestingly, we've had a question: is Earthly working on any biodiversity credit projects internationally? And then someone else in the Q&A has mentioned their own project in Portugal. So while the answer is at the moment we're UK based, it sounds like there's huge capacity to kind of go international. Lorenzo, what's the kind of status of that at the moment?
Yeah, so we're I mean, maybe one more for Sharan, I think, but we are speaking to projects internationally, and I think for us right now the focus is on UK BNG. I think in the new year we will look to sort of broaden that, and I think maybe Sharan, you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, we've gotten some interest from companies around the globe asking about biodiversity credits outside of the UK. We're definitely interested, but currently, of course, limited to the UK. Earthly is in the process of further updating our assessment, which will include, finally, it'll be an assessment that will be able to assess nature-based projects based on their quality, regardless of what financing mechanism they fall under, and then eventually also regardless of their geography. So that's the eventual goal. Of course, stay tuned till next year, and we'll be able to, I think, provide you with more updates. So but that's definitely the plan. Yes. Oh, I think we muted again, Jenny.
Thank you. No, that's great. This is a question that comes up often, actually, in the area of biodiversity credits. I don't know who wants to take this first, but the question is, why would a company buy a biodiversity credit rather than making a donation to a non-profit conservation organisation, given the tax deductibility of the latter?
I'm happy to take that quickly. I think, conservation is great and wonderful that it has that tax deductibility. I would hope that governments around the world start to realize that these elements, such voluntary mechanisms such as this, could maybe one day have the same tax breaks. But I think what we've seen certainly in our world at Earthly is that properly run projects that have clear metrics and goals and ambitions which are monitored really specifically is what we're trying to deliver on. I think there is a place for conservation and wider ecosystem restoration and stuff, but really sometimes I think that hasn't worked as well. We've seen a lot of that sort of a limited uptake, as it were. And I think that by building trust and having more clear metrics and outcomes, methodologies that have been studied and scientifically approved, gives the buyer side more confidence of what is going to be delivered over time. And I think that's what we see from buyers, is they want more trust, more validation of the outcomes, and that in turn will inspire them to support these projects further. So I think there's a place for both, but I think those that really want to ensure outcomes will follow methodologies that are really robustly sound, that have metrics and key supportive indicators that demonstrate that the outcomes are valid and true.
Mark, did you want to add anything to that, or do you kind of support Lorenzo's analysis there?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. No, I completely agree with Lorenzo. I think, go back sort of a year and people would sort of not particularly understand the relevance of compliance monitoring, or from our perspective as an LPA, regulating those schemes, or from the provider's perspective, making sure that what they're committed to doing actually happens. Fast forward a year, I was just at the Nature Finance Conference last week, and it's all about standards, it's all about regulation, it's all about making sure that these schemes can be rigorously upheld through ironclad Section 106 legal agreements or conservation covenants, with really robust and rigorous monitoring, so that they can have the integrity that they need for others to rely on them, whether that's corporates voluntarily purchasing, or whether that's developers looking to use them to regularize their development. But the penny has dropped that compliance standards, best practice, and rigorously maintaining that for the contract period is so important for this, thankfully, because it's been something that has been a bone of contention, I suppose, for LPAs, because what that means is we can't enter into unfunded Section 106 obligations, and of course monitoring costs, and then you have to apply a cost to that. So I think now people are understanding where that cost goes, and a lot of that cost for us actually to have impartial ecologists to go and visit these sites and these schemes is a really important part of the process. So yeah, long may that continue.
Yeah, thank you. We've had a few more questions about costs, about absorbing costs, about measurement, but I think what I'll do for the sake of everybody's time is we'll collate some answers from our panel, and then we'll send around a follow-up with any further information. So if you have a question that we haven't had time to answer, please do still drop it in the Q&A, and I'll make sure it gets answered and sent out to everybody. But thank you so much, Mark, Sharan and Lorenzo, for all your input and your insights. And we'll wrap it up here.